I think in your younger years, you operate from a take mindset, hoard, reserve, take, hoard, reserve, take. And I think you have to reach a threshold where you realize you have reached the promised land. You have achieved success. And in order for you to keep going, you now have to give.
Welcome to the Small Steps, Big Wins podcast. I'm dedicated to helping you take control of your life. Together, we'll explore practical tips, expert advice, and inspiring stories to help you overcome obstacles and achieve your goals. Making small changes is possible and can lead to big results. Are you ready? Let's go do this. Hey, Zach. Thanks for taking time out of your day. I'm very excited for our conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sue. I'm really happy to be here. I'm really happy to share some, a little bit about my personal story and my journey that has kind of led me to where I am today. And I hope that ultimately, my story can help either motivate or impact some other people's lives, and that people find, value in, me sharing my story.
Yeah, I think so. Well, in the theme of small steps, big wins, I love to let my guests introduce themselves and then share your story. So start where you'd like, and then we'll just bounce from there.
Okay. Yeah. So just kind of giving a little bit of background about myself. I basically grew up relatively on the less affluent side. My parents, my dad was a sole provider. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. I ended up graduating toward the top of my class in high school. I did fairly well in school. When it came to the tail end of high school, my parents filed for bankruptcy when I was a senior in high school, about 2 weeks before I had to commit for where I was going to be going to college. And that was a real whirlwind for me. I didn't really know how to handle what was me going, the decision of where I would be going to college. And so effectively what I determined is I said, I'm just going to pick the option that is the cheapest option for me that I can commute to. And my main concern was not accruing student debt. I think that was my primary concern because I was able to see what not student debt in general had done to my parents, and how negatively impactful that was to my parents. So I think my most large concern was, how can I mitigate financial stress on myself and potential risk while still trying to sort of benefit and progress my own professional life. I was the first person in my family to go to college. The day after I graduated high school, I quit my Legion baseball team. I took on a second job. I began working like 70 to 80 hours a week in an effort to try to accumulate funds to be able to pay for my freshman year of college so that I didn't have to go into debt. It was a really unpleasant process. I ended up paying for my freshman year out of pocket and didn't have to accrue any debt, which was great. I got to the end of my freshman year and said, this was horrible. I don't want to do that again. And I ended up enlisting in the military. During that time, I spent 6 years in the military reserves. I was able to receive my college degree for free. So I ended up graduating college with about 35 to 45K worth of money in my bank account, which was sort of a good jumping off point. And then from a professional standpoint, I got my degree in finance, but I actually ended up pursuing my passion in fitness. And I went from being a personal trainer at a luxury fitness facility to now running my own strength and conditioning facility in the outskirts of Boston in Needham, Massachusetts. My partner and I, one of my colleagues from Equinox being the luxury gym that I worked at, my partner and we have 7 coaches that work for us. We have a full-time admin, and we just expanded our facility, and we're really excited for the prospects of what this has looked like over the last year. And simultaneously, I've been working with my business partner in real estate and gradually using the funds and my relationships from my business to help facilitate and scale my real estate portfolio.
Oh, wow. First of all, Zach, your story is just laced with perseverance and grit. I have to tell you, to be a freshman, to work 70, 80 hours as a high school kid, and then go to college and pay for it yourself. So let's take all that you talked about. What are some of your beliefs, like your anchors about how you face challenges? Because you had some challenges.
Sure. I think that There's kind of two underlying principles that really impact me in a way that I kind of keep with me every day. And I hadn't even realized that these things innately were something that were like a value system for me until I started speaking about these types of things as I've gotten to the point where I'm at today. But the two things that were really impactful for me is there's two kind of vivid memories. One is that during my younger years, my dad was a really, really big baseball card, and I mean sports card. We just call them baseball cards, but sports card collector. And my dad had thousands and thousands and thousands of sports cards. And we would sit down all the time when I was really young and we would go through them together. And my dad would teach me how to look at analyzing the stats of the player to be able to determine who was better at, who was better than, the other player that was being compared to. And majority of the time, I was able to decipher the stats and look at the player, and I was able to determine who was better. And there were instances in which I would bring two to my dad, and I would say this, player A is better than player B based off of this, the stats that are on the back of the card. And my dad would say, no, that's wrong. And my dad would say, majority of the time, he said, what I've taught you is I've taught you how to analyze whether players are good or not. He said, there's one key component that's missing here. And he said, the key component that's missing here is, does the person win? And it always came down to, it doesn't matter whether this player is better or that player is better. It matters who wins. And this principle for me became so engraved in my mindset and my lifestyle that I didn't care about individual outcomes per se in regards to like whether people viewed me as better or worse. I just cared about trying to win in every, encounter that I and I think that this made me really stubborn and really persistent and really resilient as a young kid. And I think that that just sort of transpired as I grew up. I think that one of the things that I realized during my probably teenage years, but then certainly during my early adulthood, was that majority of people are simply just not willing to wake up as early as me, put in as many hours per day in regards to work, and do it day in and day out, week in and week out, year in and year out. And I think that what it comes down to is my mindset has effectively shifted to, if I can wake up earlier and I can put 110% effort into what it is that I'm doing, and I can do it longer and endure more than majority of people, then I find it improbable that I don't end up in a position where I outperform, the mean or the norm. And I think that that's kind of, I've used that as sort of a catalyst to motivate myself to end up, in the winning column essentially.
Mm. What I hear in your story is that you are using your perseverance or grit to drive you. That's your fuel,
100%.
to win. Right. Absolutely. In it, as I was listening to you speak, you talked about how your dad showed you the baseball cards and you were looking right at the numbers and he shifted your focus to, well, yeah, these are the numbers, but you have to look at the person who wins. And then you started to develop this mindset where, yes, I'm going to be the one who wins. Now, the opposite of winning is failure, like you didn't win, right? So, how do you view those circumstances where in your mind it wasn't a win, it was a failure? What do you do with that?
So I think that one of the things that we as humans do a really innately poor job of is that when things don't go our way, we almost perseverate or obsess over the negative outcome. And then I think we try to attack ourselves or attack others as to why the situation did not go well. During my younger years, it's like I was around a whole bunch of kids who were really affluent and were going to go to college no matter what. And so I looked at it and said, the only way I'm going to go to college is if I put my head down and I strive for academic excellence. So I was taking immense amount of accountability in that circumstance. Then we start to fast forward into other things such as sports and outcomes, such as playing various sports and whether you were winning or losing. My primary sport was baseball, and I was a pitcher. And so one of the things that I loved so much about baseball and pitching was that in every single circumstance, every time the ball is thrown, there is only two people that determine the outcome. There is the person who's throwing the ball and the person who's trying to hit the ball. And it was really motivating for me because when things go poorly, there's nobody else that is responsible other than yourself. And so I think this is a testament to my, viewpoint on how I handle adversity, which is I put myself in positions where I'm fine being on an island and making mistakes. And so I think that this comes back to a concept for those of you who know the book Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink. It's a pretty impactful book that I read that has further kind of cemented this viewpoint for me is that when you achieve a suboptimal outcome, you can either point the finger and blame it somebody else, but ultimately that's not going to improve the scenario. You can look internally and figure out what you did to contribute to that poor outcome, and you can make an effort to change it, and that you can affect. So I think that it's focusing on the intangibles that you can change, the things that you can affect, and taking ownership for those things. Because ultimately, we aren't in control of our external environment. I wasn't in control of what my parents did for work. I wasn't in control of the fact that my parents didn't go to college. I wasn't in control of the fact that, my peers had more money than me. Those were things I wasn't in control of. But the thing that I was in control of is what effort I put in every day academically, what effort I put into training for sports, what effort I put into my professional life now and running my business, what effort I put into, you know, underwriting and going and looking at properties and putting together deals for real estate. And I think that this is really the underlying piece that we're trying to get back to here, which is
Mhm.
you have to own your own actions.
Owning it and taking control. And do you think that a lot of the challenges that people put on themselves is because they don't recognize what they have control over and what they don't have control over and try and control things that they can't?
I think that you can always you can always get upset over not being able to control a particular environment. For example, if you're working at a corporate job and you don't like your boss and that person is in charge of you, you're saying, I'm not in charge of my boss and I can't dictate the outcomes here. But the thing is, there's a multitude of things that you can do. You can control you sending out your resume X number of times per week to new jobs. You can control you going to networking events to try to grow your overall network that plays a role in you getting a job at a different place in a more superior role. You can control how much money you're spending on a day-to-day, on a week-to-week basis, so that you now can take some of your savings and you can create more passive income for yourself so that you don't end up in a position where you're dependent on that person who's negatively impacting your life and you're claiming that you don't enjoy working with. So I think that you can look at a circumstance and say, I have no control over it, or you can look for ways to get out of the situation that you are incurring.
That's good advice, because sometimes we don't force ourselves to look for those things. It's easier to blame everything on the outside than it is to look inside and find out what's going on inside there. One thing you said before was the word accountability, and it's so important to be accountable. What are some things that you do to help hold yourself accountable to accomplish the goals that you set for yourself?
This is a great one in my life, and my wife will love this one. So it's clear that work very hard. But I think that there's a difference between working really hard and being extremely intentional. And I think that one of the differences that has changed for me over the last 3 years is I've started to get a lot more intentional about my actions. And I think that one of the big ones for me was I, my wife and I, at the time she was my fiance, and we were coming up on getting married. And I said to her, I said, there's something that I'd like to start doing. And I think it would be really good for both of us to do this. And so what I said was, I said to her, at the beginning of the year, in the first month of the year, I want to rent an Airbnb. I don't want to go somewhere that's really densely populated. I want to go somewhere that's remote, really quiet, and relaxing. And I don't want to go somewhere with the intent of participating in any activities. I don't want it to be a destination. I want the place we're staying to be the destination. And I want to take that time and I want to break our lives down into specific categories: family, friends, your and I relationship, professional life, financial health, physical health. There's a couple other categories that we include, such as one that we call is actually called our eighth day. And so what we mean by that is, in any given week, you have 7 days a week. If you had an eighth day where you didn't have to work and you could not work, what are the things that you would do? And so we break down all of these categories and we talk about it to each other. And we come up with, in each category, what are the things that we want to improve on. And I think that this has been super impactful to my wife and I to be really in lockstep surrounding how we approach our lives on the week to week. For example, I might have put in an 8 or 10 hour workday and I want to go to a real estate meetup. My wife might just want me to come home and to spend time with her. But if one of my goals for the year is to attend 4 meetups per month, and I've said this to her explicitly, then she's more willing to support me to do that thing because she knows it's a goal of mine, and vice versa. So it creates this relationship where what she wants is she wants to support me accomplishing my goals, and vice versa. It creates an immense amount of accountability for both you and for your significant other to be able to look at. And there are years where I focus more on business development. There's years where I focus more on networking. There's years where I focus more on family and friends. And like, I think that when you go into the year and you have a specific focus in mind, I think this is the true way for you to map out the life that you actually want for yourself, rather than just simply putting your head down and relentlessly acting impulsively.
Zach, that was just so packed full of tactical and practical, and I love it. How long have you and your wife been having these retreats in January?
This will be the fourth year of this.
When you first suggested that to her, was she on board?
I think that in the beginning, I think she was like, yeah, like, I'm not really that jazzed to talk about business goals. But like, I think as time's gone along, I think it's become one of the things that she looks forward to the most, because she sees now, like, wow, they're like, this is so great. Like, this is so good for me and you.
Was this something that you learned about the vision and goal setting, or was this something that you kind of materialized over the years and realized, "Oh, this is very practical and useful, and you can see the benefits of it?"
What I will say is, like, I don't think that anything that I've done is really reinventing the wheel. I think that what I've done is I've taken a bunch of really smart people that have done really great things, and then I've just copied them. And I think that it goes all the way back to in the fitness industry, in running my gym. Who are the people in my life that I view as like the gold standard, or as mentors, or as people that I idolize or look up to? In real estate, the same thing. In So I think that, like, one of the things that I think about a lot is when you're a kid. If I asked any kid who's their role model, they'd probably have two or three answers. It might be an athlete, it might be a celebrity, it might be a pop star, it might be their parent, it might be their grandfather, it might be, there's a million different options. If you went and asked that same question to an adult, What would they say? And I think majority of adults would say, "I don't have one." And I think, like, that is so concerning because I think that what happens is that to me is like a mindset geared towards acceptance and settling. I think that you're not striving to improve, you're not looking towards other people to impact you improving yourself. The day that you wake up and determine that you don't want to focus on self improvement anymore, I think that's the day that you're pretty much already dead.
Who are your role models?
I had a high school basketball coach, and I actually wrote my college essay about this guy. He was loud, rude, vulgar, and not a lot of people liked him. And one of the things that was so impactful for me was that I don't think that he went into coaching with the mindset of, I want to make these kids better athletes or better basketball players. I think that he went into it with the mindset of, I want to make these kids really uncomfortable and I want to see how they respond. I remember we used to, and rather than having Saturday basketball practices, we would switch off weekly and we would have Saturday swim conditioning and we would have Saturday hot yoga. And what I would say as a high school kid, I'll tell you what, I definitely never hopped in a pool and did conditioning. There was a lot of kids that threw up. And what I will also tell you is that I didn't exactly seek out hot yoga in my free time. And these are things, it's like you're just getting exposed to things that are uncomfortable and not normal and sort of opening your mind up a little bit. I think one of the other things is that he always used to assign books for us to read. Then what he would do is we would be in practice and he would stop playing at some point and then he would just quiz us on something random related to the book. And what he was doing is he was basically testing your ability to be accountable. And one of the books that he prescribed was actually called The Alchemist. To me, the value in this book, essentially, it's about a young boy who is a shepherd boy, and he is relentlessly seeking salvation or trying to find his purpose in life. And he says, I need to get out of here. I need to get out of this small town area. I need to stop being a shepherd boy. I need to make moves. I need to make strides for myself. And I need to figure out what it is that I want to do with my life. And he spends all this time traveling around, seeing all these various places, trying out all these different things. And in the end, he comes back to the fact that innately what he enjoys is living in a small town, being a shepherd boy. And I think that the purpose of this is that it's important to explore and to pursue as many avenues in life as you can. But I also think it's important to never lose sight of what are the things that bring you fulfillment. And I did think that regardless of whatever it is that brings you fulfillment, I don't think you should ever be ashamed of that. And I think you should pursue it regardless.
When we were talking off camera before, you said a quote and I jotted it down and I love this. I want you to unpack it a little bit. And your quote was, this is what you said: "It doesn't matter how much money you make, it's how you persevere in a trial," end quote. We live in a financially driven world. We're told that your success, who you are as a person, is defined by how much you make. Talk about your thoughts behind your quote and what that means to you.
You could go to a phenomenal academic school for undergrad, get a great degree, walk into a position, do a decent job, end up in a position where you're making a pretty nice salary and never really face any adversity or anything that really forces you to be uncomfortable and try to persevere. And I think that's okay. There's a lot of barriers that blockade the ability to move forward. And that can be improve yourself physically, improve yourself mentally, improve yourself socially, improve yourself professionally. There's so many avenues in which you can improve yourself. And it's about understanding what are your weaknesses. Like I think about this all the time for myself and trying to dissect what are my weaknesses. And then what I'll do is I'll go find a person who writes a book on that content and I'll buy the audiobook and put it in my car and I'll listen to it. And it puts perspective for me to basically take a category that I'm not good at or not versed at, and then to challenge my thinking on that concept. And I think that this is where the journey itself is is the conquest to you reaching that fulfillment, reaching that point in which you are content, happy, satisfied with your life. I think that the monetary piece just sort of comes along with. I think that if you woke up every day and focused on improving yourself in as many areas as possible and constantly diagnosing weaknesses, I think the financials will come no matter what.
So you mentioned, personal development and improvement in a number of different areas, whether it's financially, professionally, personally. How do you keep yourself from becoming overwhelmed when you step back and you see all these areas that require development?
Because it's not something that I'm thinking about on the daily per se. I think that what I do is I take 1 or 2 times per year and I simply reflect on myself and say, like, what do I need to be better at? And I'll dissect many areas, and then I'll say, okay, what can I do to work on those things? And I'll take all these areas and then I'll say, how can I find something that will help me become better in these areas? All I'll do is I'll just source the solutions, I'll put them in queue, and I'll get to it at some point. And then what happens is every day I spend 30 minutes driving to my job. I spend 30 minutes coming home. I spend 30 minutes cooking dinner. I spend 20 minutes walking my dog. Like, these are all times in which you can start to include those things. And it's just making use of casual downtime where you have the ability to digest information. And one of the things that I will say is, like, when I feel something is going suboptimally or I need to source a solution for something that is challenging me, what I will do is I will try to figure out what is the solution to this. Have I already sourced a solution? And then what I'll do is I'll operate at like a 5 or a 6 out of 10 intensity on like a jog, and I'll toss it on and I'll listen to it. And I'm focusing on the material and not on the physical activity. One of the really cool things about this is that you have no external stimulus aside from that thing. You're not looking at your cell phone scrolling. You're not on the internet. You're not getting called on your job, right? You're not having somebody come up and try and talk to you. I think that this is really powerful for people who are really busy and who are constantly being spread in a million different directions. If you can disconnect from from all the other things that are pulling your attention when you are faced with something that's challenging, and you can take 30 to 45 minutes to think critically on that idea or that thing that needs your attention, what I would say is you'll be really effective at that. And I don't think it has to be jogging outside. It could be walking down the street. It could be, you know, driving to a more refined location and, hanging out in the woods. Like, what it comes down to is I just think disconnecting yourself from all stimulus really allows for you to be a lot more clear minded and focused on making decisions on things that take a little bit more to unpack. And I think that can be an avenue to not allow for yourself to be overwhelmed when dealing with a lot of stuff.
I love what you just said. It's a cross between focused exercise and meditation. There's something about moving your body in that exercise that brings your brain to a higher level to be able to think about that problem that you have in front of you.
I do think that that's a big one, and I think that one of the other things is, and that I think is can be so it's so simple and it's so impactful, is there's a book that I read called Checklist Manifesto. Overall, I actually thought the book was kind of mediocre. This book is about a person who is a surgeon, works in a really stress-inducing environment in the hospital, and there is a lot of different things that need to happen in sequential order in order for things to be carried out without there being a problem. And you can't forget one step along the way, or things can go drastically wrong. And so what they talk about is that they basically did a case study where they basically, from a operating standpoint, they began relentlessly instituting lists, checklists in every aspect, in every venture in the hospital. And then they charted the institution of checklists, and then the mistakes, the amount of mistakes that were made, and then basically created a graph to correlate the two. And one of the things that they found was that when you are spread in a million different directions and you are forced to try to accomplish as much activity as you can, what ends up happening is you make mistakes or you forget things. But you know what we did find is that proficiency and executing all of the things that you were supposed to without forgetting or without making a mistake when you had a checklist is exponentially higher. And so it's as simple as every single day, when you think about something that needs to get done, when you think about something that you want to do or something that you need to change, or an instance comes up that says, man, that engagement or that interaction didn't go the way that I wanted to. Maybe it was me. Maybe there's a weakness that I had there. Maybe something I did wrong. What did I do wrong? And then you can write it down. Everything that comes up in your head, if you log all of the ideas you have, all of the things that you feel like you could do better, write it down on a list. The thing is that you don't have to attack every one of those things. But you know what's going to happen? When you have downtime, now you got 10 or 15 things you can look at and you don't even have to think about it. They're already there. And so now what this is doing is it's guaranteeing success in your downtime.
I love the idea of the checklist. Thank you for sharing that about that book. What's an example of a checklist in your life?
I if you looked at the notes section in my phone, most people would probably go into cardiac arrest.
Okay, let's get practical and tactical then, because the name of the podcast is Small Steps, Big Wins, and you have laid out an immense groundwork for practical application. Well, actually, high level application. So, talk about the notes section in your phone and what is a small step that we can take to help implement a lot of the great ideas and thoughts that you've brought into our conversation.
So I'll break it down by category. So like to the point that we made earlier, I'll have my job, I'll have my home life, I'll have real estate, I'll have, there's some impactful people that work for me. I'll write their name down and I'll write items underneath their name. So now what ends up happening is when I have an engagement, when I have a meeting with that person, I already have 7 to 10 thoughts of things that I want to talk about with that person. When I have downtime and I want to focus on my job and things that I need to do for my job, bang, I got 7 to 10 things that I got to attack. If I have downtime and I want to try to focus on real estate, then I have 7 to 10 things that I have to focus on for real estate. So what happens here is now anytime that you have 20 minutes, 30 minutes throughout the day to be able to attack something, I look at it and I'm like, all right, what do I want to work on? And so now how this is helpful is that when I categorize it out, I now have the ability to just blow through that category relentlessly. And so oftentimes when if you have 10 million things to do and you put one list together, it's also really overwhelming because all the tasks, they're not synergistic. They don't work together. But if I'm doing 7 things for my job, they all work together. They're all going to require the same process. So now I can go through those 7 things really efficiently. And so this kind of comes back to a concept that I forget the book. Oh man.
Is it Atomic Habits? That's the one I'm thinking of.
It
I'm
might
thinking
be
of I'm thinking of chunking, like what you're talking about
yeah,
when you
yeah.
you know, when you take all your work items and you put those 5 or 6 things together and then knock them all out rather than doing one work thing.
There's
one
a
personal thing, one something else of thing, because you have to start and stop your brain into different areas in order to operate under that particular topic.
You got it. But additionally, what I would also say is I actually now thought of it. There's a book that is called Flow. And this book talks about when you sit down to do work on anything and you sit down and you're like, all right, let me check my email. Let me check my Facebook, right? Let me answer a phone call. When you are constantly interrupted, every time that you shift focus is essentially inefficiency of operation. So now your ability to attack 10 different things, but they're all one focus, you are automatically going to be more efficient at going through that 10 list item set of items if they are all related. The guy who writes this book calls this flow state. And so the idea is you are sitting down, you are getting into one focus, and then you are going as hard as possible in that focus and then having that chunk of time to be able to allow for you to get into that state is what allows for you to optimize efficiency. And I think that this is kind of what you were hitting on, Sue.
Yeah. It's all about mindset, isn't it?
It's 100%.
Yeah. Yeah. What are some other practices that you do to help to maintain a positive mindset, a positive outlook in your life?
I think that fitness is such a big part for me. If I show up every single day and exercise, and I notice myself making progress in exercise, and I'm not talking about body composition, I'm talking about performance. I'm talking about improving performance. If you can show up every day and you can improve performance even a little bit, there's many ways you can attack it. It could be decreasing the amount of time it takes you to run a certain distance. It could be increasing the number of reps you can do on a specific exercise. It could be increasing the amount of weight you lift on a specific exercise. It could be improving the range of motion on a particular exercise. There's many ways to go at it. In general, when you show up every single day and you put an hour of time in, per se, into self improvement, and you notice self improvement, that carries with you into every other thing that you do. So you are now going to show up and say, I'm better than I was before. And now, when you go into everything you do saying you're better than you were the day before, let's compound that over 365. Let's compound that over 5 years. Let's compound that over 10 years. This comes back to your whole premise, which is small steps, big wins, which is small step today, make a small amount of progress, improve your confidence. And if you improve your confidence by a small amount every single day, by the time that you get to where you want to be and you compound that over 5, 10 years, you are going to be a powerful person, a confident person, a successful person, and you will be resilient and you will be a winner.
1% better each day, isn't it?
I'll take less than
Yeah.
1%.
That's a good way to look at it. Sometimes we want noticeable mountain-sized changes in a short amount of time. And it's important to remind ourselves that change does take place. You have to compare yourself to who you were last year. And sometimes when you take a longer time horizon to look at your accomplishments, it's actually more satisfying when you ask yourself the question, wow, where was I a year ago? Okay, look at where I am today, rather than saying, where was I yesterday? It's good in a way. It's like, okay, can I improve a little bit today? But we can see more growth if you take a longer time horizon with it. We talked about, or you talked about before, about the people that you surrounded yourself or the people that you came in contact over your lifetime, your mentors. And there's a saying out there that says you're the sum of the 5 people you hang around with the most and spend time with. Briefly touch on some of the current people that you have surrounding you and how they help you to move forward.
The people that I spend the most time with are my wife. And what I will say is, my wife, I would not have accomplished in the last 3 to 5 years what I have and all of the professional success that I have and all of the real estate related success that I have. And this is so impactful for me to be able to wake up every day and be able to attack my goals. And I'm so thankful to have her because I think that we want the same things at the end of the day. And I think that she realizes that if she is able to make my life easier, then we will also get there faster. And I think that that has been a mutual understanding together. And I think that there are times I relentlessly convey my appreciation for all of those things to the highest degree. I think that's a big one for me.
Just in the fact that the two of you take the yearly retreats and are intentional about deciding what your year is gonna look like and what your goals are just speaks volumes to the fact that both of you want the same things in life and you're on the same trajectory. And the other person, I believe you were gonna say your partner.
Yeah, is my real estate partner, Andrew. And I think that with Andrew, I have never in my life come across somebody that I have had the pleasure of having a relationship with formally in a business way that actually I could look at and say, this person works as hard as me and wants to work as hard as me. And this is the only person I've ever come across that I feel that way toward. So I think that we never feel like we are forcing one another to do something, and we never feel like we are bothering each other. We improve each other because we push each other in a way where there's no pushback.
And Andrew, who you mentioned, that's Andrew Freed, and he's been on my podcast twice now. And I have had the honor and privilege of knowing him, I would say over a year now. And he's
Nice.
an amazing individual. And I can see where the two of you would be very synergistic for each other because Andrew is a self-improvement junkie. He will say that. He actually said that on my podcast. He is a self-improvement junkie and he absolutely loves and embraces self-improvement. So I can see where the two of you would just complement each other quite nicely in that area. And yes, he's a very hardworking guy. And when you hear all the stuff that he does, and and it happened on the podcast too. He was listing out all these things. I'm like, oh my god, man, how do you keep all that going? For those listening, you have to go back and listen to the podcast because he did explain how he keeps all those plates spinning for himself. If you could go back in time to your younger self and deliver a message, what would the message be?
Keep going, you'll get there. I think everybody needs to tell themselves that. I think that no matter what happens, you have to wake up every single day. You have to keep trying and you have to believe in yourself. I think a lot of my personal success is me waking up every day and me betting on myself. And you can't do that if you don't believe in yourself.
It's a great tie-in to my last question. Actually, I have 3 core questions that I ask. We already answered one of them, and that was the book that you would recommend, and we talked about a couple of those. The other 2 questions, we'll tie them in, and then we'll round it up here. What's a question or topic that you wish I would have asked about, and how would you have answered it or expanded on it?
As you achieve more professional success, what has shifted or changed in your mindset that allows for you to continuously make more strides in success? Because I think that what I have realized is that the mindset that helps you get to being successful needs to be changed once you feel you are successful. And the reason I feel that way is because you start relying on other people and you have to shift yourself from being so self-oriented to achieve success, and that you reach a stepping stone in which you rely on other people to continue to make success. And now you have to shift your mindset towards motivating, caring for, and fostering other people and retaining those people and building trust with those people. And I think that that mindset shift is really challenging because you have to completely 180 your entire way of thinking. And I think that is the limiting factor that prevents people from moving on to the next threshold. And I think a lot of people never really reach that threshold. They end up spinning their wheels, staying in the same place because they're not focused on others. They're still trying to focus on themselves.
If I hear what you're saying correctly, in order to keep on and going to the next level, you have to take your eyes off yourself and grow so that your ultimate end game is not self-fulfillment, but rather what you can do for others and how you can make an impact in some capacity in society.
I think in your younger years, you operate from a take mindset, hoard, reserve, take, hoard, reserve, take. And I think you have to reach a threshold where you realize you have reached the promised land. You have achieved success. And in order for you to keep going, you now have to give. You now have to motivate. You now have to incentivize. You now have to prompt. You now have to coach. You now have to improve others. And I think that that is the next step. If
Yeah.
you continue to operate from take, hoard, preserve, you won't get there.
Zach, how do you define success?
Indefinite self improvement. And in order to do that, you have to be self reflective.
That's a great answer. I asked it because all of us have a different definition of what success looks like. And a lot of times it is something that's concrete. What I love about your answer is you're never really there if you think about
Well,
it.
I think that it's like you can say like you're never really there, but you can say that like you're always there. It's like I could have a person who drives a BMW who makes $200,000 a year, who works in sales and who wakes up every day and does the same thing and doesn't try to improve. And that person to me is not successful. But I think that I could have a person who is grinding away, drives a Honda, is saving money, is trying to level up their career, is taking classes after work, is going to the gym for 4 days a week. That person is there. That person is successful. And so, like, what I'm saying is, it's not about monetary status, it's about mindset. And so, I want to surround myself with as many people that are the second rather than the first.
Mhm. That makes sense. That makes sense.
Exactly.
It's almost, are you familiar with Ray Dalio's principles?
Bingo.
Yeah, yeah,
Love it.
he
Read it.
talks about the iterations of the self and how it's an upward spiral, and, like, you're always iterating yourself, and sometimes you're gonna have that setback, but that's okay because that challenge allows you to grow more and allows you to continue up and up and
Yep.
up. So, it makes perfect sense, but I'm glad we talked about the success because it can be something where people, if you look at it the wrong way, yeah, you could look for a either a monetary target or something tangible as a target. Whereas if you look at success as something that's an iteration where you just keep getting better and better and better, then makes life a game too.
Life's more fun when you make it a game.
Yeah, this is true. This is true. Well, Zach, as we close, what's one small step that someone can do today that's going to help them change their tomorrow?
Write down 5 things that you want to do better. Write down 5 things you want to do better and try to source solutions as to how you can do those things better and keep them in the notes section of your phone and look at it every day. And then when you run out of things, do it again.
That's a great tactical, practical application. Love that. How can people reach out to you and find you?
Yeah, the best way to reach me is on Instagram. My Instagram is at the 1099 mindset, at the 1099 mindset.
Well, Zach, thank you. Thank you so much for the gift of your time. This has been an amazing conversation.
Thank you so much, and I appreciate that. And I hope that everybody finds some value in some of the things that we discussed. And if you have interest in connecting with myself regarding your own personal life or journey, or if you have interest in connecting with Andrew or myself in regards to real estate, feel free. Or if you just simply want to come in and get a workout in my gym, if you're in the Boston area, feel free to hit me up.
What's the name of your gym?
Gray's Anatomy.
Okay, perfect. All right. Thank you, Zach. Have an awesome day.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Small Steps, Big Wins podcast. I value your time with me and I seek to make every moment count. In order to make lasting change in your life, listening is usually not enough. So I want to ask you, what practical steps are you going to put into action today as a result of listening to this podcast? Remember, any step, any action, no matter how small, starts your journey to a big win. And if you're not sure where to get started, check out my website, personalcoachfinder.com, and find someone who can help. Remember, life doesn't get better by chance, it gets better by choice. Take small steps today and make your life awesome, friends.